Welcome to the June 10th, 2016 edition of Colorado Inside Out Postgame, a special web-exclusive production here on Channel 12. Let's get a quick take on the U.S. Geological Survey announcing this week that a formation in western Colorado contains 40 more times the natural gas previously thought to be in the state. That's right, 40 more times. I want to be sure I underline that because we were thinking just around the table, you have 40% more. No, 40 times more than the way they thought. Pat Calhoun from Westward. This seems to be a game changer. This seems like Colorado could be the Saudi Arabia of natural gas, but do we want to be?
Well, that's a very good question. Another good question is, how do you miss something being 40 times more than you thought? So we've got, I'm not a geologist, but our governor is, although he's not out there probably staking out all these lands. But if a story is 40 times worse than I thought it was originally when it was delivered to me, I figured that out pretty quickly. So it's interesting that this has come up. It's a fascinating asset for the state of Colorado. It's certainly nice to know you've got a potential riches there. It's not going to be easy to access it. It's kind of a rainy day fund for the state. When we're willing to go have some more environmental fights, that when we're done fracking fights and all the other fights, we know that's there. But it's a fascinating find.
David Copel from the Independence Institute and DU Law School. The fracking fight hasn't completely gone away, but it seems to have kind of stayed at the fringes, especially compared to 2014. Does this discovery and the headlines it brought put fuel to that fire, pun very well intended?
I think the idea that, first of all, Colorado has the strictest environmental laws for fracking in the United States, and that's fine because Colorado, there's a shared ethic of strong environmental protection in this state. But fracking can be done in a responsible and environmentally protective way. This is and the anti-frack activists, I think, are losing the public debate. And if their threat of like we're going to have a ballot issue in 2016 is increasingly empty, in a way I hope they do, because I think they will get defeated overwhelmingly. And maybe finally recognize they're rejected by the large majority of Coloradans. They have this, view of natural resources like natural gas, oil, the same way that an extremist Jewish sect might have of pork is not only they don't want to use any, which is fine, it's their choice, but they want to impose their morality on everybody else and shut it down completely. It's a huge national security benefit for the United States as it's now becoming a net energy exporter, not only for ourselves, so we don't send our money overseas to tyrannies like Saudi Arabia, the Gulf states, the Maduro socialist dictatorship in Venezuela, but also if we can export more, that means Western Europe, which is currently so desperately dependent on Soviet, quasi-Soviet, neo-Soviet, Putin, big baby Donnie's new best friend. They can instead get our energy from us. That would be a huge gain for national security and global security against tyranny. And it's clean, and all the mythology, we were supposed to be, back when I was covering the 2008 Democratic Convention here for the Rocky Mountain News, there was a lot of energy on we need to switch from coal to natural gas, the Pickens plan, all that kind of stuff. And that was the great thing of progressive environmentalists. And there's a lot of good arguments in terms of air pollution on that issue. But it's too bad that the sensible environmentalists like John Hickenlooper sometimes have their voice shouted down by the religious extremists.
Eric Sonderman, political analyst. Fracking is, I think, probably going to be one of these issues in Colorado that just always stays controversial. But when you see a headline like this, 40 times more, right now our economy is doing really well. We're growing. We can't build enough buildings, all that kind of good stuff. But we know there's an ebb and flow to the economy, both globally, but especially here in Colorado. Times get a little tougher, natural gas prices increase a little bit. You can definitely see the tide turning about, well, it's time to drill a lot more. Do you think there's going to be more action on this now, or it's going to wait until something hits the fan?
Well, imagine that this announcement had happened when not only do you have a prospective ballot issue and everything else, but when gas was at maybe $100 as opposed to where it is now, when it was much more economically feasible for companies to be pulling it out of the ground. Then I think what this announcement has done is it just has raised the stakes of the whole debate, the prospective ballot measures, the whole political fight. I don't know if it's going to be solved at the ballot box in 2016. Ultimately, as we've talked before on this show, it will be solved at some ballot box some year, because this is just one of those emotional issues that ultimately voters will have the last say on, or maybe it's a Doug Bruce kind of issue where it keeps coming back multiple times for multiple says. First of all, to Patty's point, yeah, I mean, how do you miss it by this much? It's like, okay, here's our prediction, and we're pretty confident in our prediction, plus or minus 4,000%. It just boggles the mind how, and again, I'm not a geologist, I'm not a technical person, but that was one of those announcements that makes you just sort of sit back and scratch your head. There is a contingent in this country that really does not want any natural resource usage. There was a big fight about coal. That fight was really won by the environmental community. But instead of taking that victory and having a nice victory party and popping some champagne, it has now moved on to a new form of extraction that is infinitely cleaner. The whole fracking debate is so much more about emotion and emotionally charged arguments than it is about facts. We'll see if facts can ultimately win out in this debate, but this, as I said, has raised the stakes of that debate.
Penfield Tate, attorney with QTAC Rock, also longtime state lawmaker. Political parties always have an issue that within their own party there'll be some battle over. For Republicans, it's often been social issues, and that continues. But it seems for Democrats that the environment's a big one, and especially here in Colorado, and especially with fracking. Does a headline like this magnify that possible chasm between the environmentalist wing and more of a business wing within the Democratic Party in Colorado?
It could, but I think the circumstances are such that it won't. First of all, I think we all go back to Patty's point. How do you make a 4,000% error? and what now happens is those folks who are opposed to fracking are going to be able to say, you didn't even know what was in the ground. Why do we believe you can extract it safely? If you don't have enough sense to figure out what's there, why should we believe you can extract it safely? Secondly, when you look at the whole fracking debate, one of the biggest problems, and I have said this all along, and I think it still exists, is nobody's got any facts or data they're willing to put on the table so that people can make a reasoned decision. There are all these emotional pitches, and the commercials have sort of fit a stereotype. It's usually white women with kids walking along the streamside talking about, I love the outdoors, I love the ocean blue, I love the streams, and I'm a nuclear scientist, and I think fracking's good. So the debate is not advancing anywhere, and I don't think this resource will be exploited readily, because commodity prices are down and are continuing to tumble, and it's just not economic for anyone to go out there and invest a whole bunch of money in trying to frack or do anything to extract the resource, because it's just not cost effective. And there's a final piece that doesn't get discussed a lot, but you see more and more economists talking about the fact that with more energy efficient appliances, construction, cars, everything else, that we as a world are rapidly reaching a point where our reliance upon fossil fuels is dropping faster than our consumption of what's available. So we're going to hit a cross point where we'll frankly have too much of the resource available, more than we'll ever need, because our reliance on those fossil fuels has moved to the point where they're just not that important anymore.
That would be an interesting crossroads to get to, indeed. That's all the time we have for Colorado Inside Out postgame this week. Leave us a comment, tell us what you think. For everyone here at CPT12.org, I'm Dominic Dezzutti. Thanks for watching.